Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. My guest today is Dr. Lance Bennett, the president and founder of the People's Institute for the Common Good, a nonprofit organization with a big vision to create spaces where people come together to learn from each other, wrestle with hard questions, and serve their communities for the common good. He's also a visiting scholar at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice, and the Center for Minority Serving Institutions at Rutgers University. Dr. Bennett is an adjunct faculty member in the Doctor of Education in Leadership and Higher Education program at St. Edward's University. In the higher education profession, he serves on the Editorial Advisory Board of Liberal Education, the flagship magazine of the American Association of Colleges and Universities. He's also a published author with articles published in the disciplines of higher education, teaching, learning, and interpersonal communication. In this episode, Dr. Bennett and I sat down to chat about how he went from being on track to becoming a university president to an educational entrepreneur. We get into how he's challenging traditional systems with the People's Institute for the Common Good, insights on creating spaces for lifelong learning, the importance of community-focused education, and his vision for a more inclusive and impactful educational landscape. Before we dive in, if you love what we're doing here at a Bright Idea podcast, help us keep going. You can subscribe to this show to get notifications when new episodes drop. If you like what you hear, share this episode with someone who needs a little inspiration. And if you would like to support the show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at a Bright Idea Podcast. Lastly, if you're a business owner or a brand looking to connect with our growing audience, we'd love to collaborate with you. You can sponsor an ad within one of our episodes or sponsor an entire episode. Just reach out to us to learn more. Now let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Dr. Lance Bennett, founder of the People's Institute for Common Good. All right, we're here with Dr. Lance Bennett with the Institution of Common Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Amber. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for coming on to a Bright Idea podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Before we get started, I want people to know a little more about you before we get into your nonprofit, the Institution for Common Good. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to play rapid fire with you.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Like how early? How early are we talking?
Shoot. 7. My alarm is always set for 7.
Okay. Have you always been that way?
Yeah, I've always been an early bird, get up. I mean, even when I was in college, I was up around like 5 a.m.
Okay, that's something we have in common. I'm an early bird as well.
Yeah.
One public figure, past or present, that you'd love to have a conversation with.
Ooh, that's a good question. I would think Booker T. Washington is someone who I would love to have a conversation with. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Battle for the Black Mind by Dr. Karita Brown. And so part of the book goes into, his experience with W.E.B. Du Bois. Mm-hmm. And I would just want to have a conversation with him about just those experiences between the two of them and what that was like.
That's a great one. What's your coffee order or your go-to fuel during long days?
Iced chai latte.
Wait, stop. That's so funny. I've had an iced chai latte the past 2 days. That's like my go-to. Yeah. Yeah. I've had to take a break from coffee lately, so that's been my next go-to.
Yeah, it's real good, real good. Every morning.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. The book that's most shaped how you think about leadership and about the community.
That's a good one. I would say Imagination by Ruha Benjamin.
Okay.
So she's a professor at Princeton University. She talks about how we need imagination to help shape the worlds that we want to see. And that, people like to extinguish the imagination of certain people. But our imaginations are the things that allow our society to be constructed.
And lastly, what's more powerful, a great question or a great answer?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a great question because you don't, I don't know, you don't always have to have an answer to everything. But, a great question can lead you to great answers and it can lead you to different possibilities that you may not have thought about before. And so I would say the great question.
Love that. Thanks so much for playing. I hope that our listeners here have gotten to know you a little bit. Before we get into your story, I always feel like there's an origin story for everybody. There's someone like where everyone starts, and I find it so interesting on this show to kind of go on that journey to see what led you to today, which is the Institution for Common Good. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your childhood, and how you grew up. Where are you from?
I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I also spent time in Delaware County, Pennsylvania too. And so that's where everything began for me. When I was in elementary school, middle school, I went to public school, but then from middle school to high school, I went to a private boarding school in North Philadelphia called Girard College, and so that's where everything kind of began for me. It was an amazing experience. I still have my close friends from that time, and we actually just had a call the other night, and so it's always great to reconnect with them every couple of weeks and stay in touch with people from back home.
I always find when I talk to people that started in public school and then went to private school or vice versa, they talk a lot about there's a bit of like a culture shift, like it's a huge change. Was that your experience, or can you talk about the experience from going from public school to private school?
Yeah, so in private school, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you thought you were smart and before, but like everybody's smart now. And so
Okay.
everybody is, really intelligent and everyone has really big goals for themselves. And so you're not the only one, right? And so, especially in my case, not just going to a private school, but to a boarding school, living there 5 days a week, going home on the weekends. That was a different experience, unlike anything I ever had before, right? Because one, you're now responsible. Yes, there were adults to help us out and chaperone us, basically, but you're on your own in terms of all the stuff you need to do.
Mm.
You need to take care of your laundry, your dorm, all that stuff. It's all you, and so it was different for the first, I'd say, first like half year that I was there.
Yeah.
I was homesick a lot, but as time went on, I got adjusted. So yeah,
Did you grow up with siblings?
no, I'm an only child. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
so that's another thing too. Was like, dang, I was on a single parent home, only child, and so it's like, dang, I kind of feel like I've for the first like year or so, I felt like I was by myself. But those relationships started to form after, more concretely after the first year,
Okay.
and so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I find that you're talking about. I'd imagine during that time, if you would have lined you along with all of us, people that didn't go to boarding school during that time, you were probably way more advanced in terms of responsibility and kind of like you had this like accelerated life
Because
lifestyle.
because when I went to college, I was good to go, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew what I needed to do because I felt like I had so many years of preparation,
Right.
um, going to class, on my own, right? And
Mm.
um, you know, I worked when I was in high school. I worked a job on campus, right? We had like what was like the high school version of work study,
Yeah.
and so we had that, and we had an apprenticeship program that I was part of, and so yeah, so it was kind of like college.
Yeah.
It's
So
really
you weren't like the rest of us, like tie dyeing our clothes by accident because we were just doing our laundry for the first time ever.
no, no, no,
You
no.
were probably looking at us like amateurs. I've been doing this since I
Right,
was like 14.
right. Like, I mean, I remember when I was in college though, folks. I mean, like people would just like hog the washer, the dryer, the dorm, and I'm like, yo, like, don't you know that you need to like when your time is up to come get your stuff? People let
Yes.
that thing sit there for like days.
Right,
And
right.
so one time I just got so frustrated, took someone's clothes out the dryer and just left them on the thing.
They were probably mine because admittedly that was me. I was that was definitely me. I want to talk to you though about back to your childhood. How do you think you said you grew up in a single parent household? Did you grow up with your mother or your father?
It was my mom.
Okay. And how do you think she would describe you as a kid?
As a kid, I think she would describe me as someone who was like really ambitious. I think she would say I was someone who latched on to like certain interests and never let it go. So
Mm,
as a kid, I had this fascination with buses. I don't know why. Like,
okay.
I loved SEPTA as a kid. And for those who don't know, SEPTA is the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. Uh, I don't know, as a kid, I loved SEPTA.
Well,
I,
to be fair, I love SEPTA too.
yeah.
Because for the listeners, you and I both went to Westchester University. I was an undergrad when you were getting your master's at Westchester. And
Mhm, mhm.
Westchester, for the listeners, is about 40 minutes outside of Philadelphia. And I had a bunch of friends that went to Temple. So I would take SEPTA every weekend
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
city.
that's right.
So your
That's
love
right.
of SEPTA, you're not alone.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
but
glad. I'm glad to
yeah,
hear it. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I mean, I was a SEPTA bus driver for Halloween a few years in a row. So
hilarious.
yeah,
Okay. What do you
that was
think was the fascination though?
I don't know. I think I just liked systems,
Hmm.
right? I think that was it. It's like it was something that I just like latched onto of like this connects to this connects to that, gets this from here to there. I don't know. It's something that I feel actually came in handy later in my career of thinking through different steps of how to like organize and structure uh, within organizations. So yeah, it's interesting.
Coming up, how Dr. Bennett used systems to build the People's Institute for Common Good.
No, I love that. And it makes so much sense as a segue into your institution. I mean, building an education institute, being an educational entrepreneur, all of it is about systems. So it makes total sense why that was something that you latched onto early on. I want to get into education for a bit while people are listening. You have quite a few degrees. So you went to a community college in Delaware, and then you and I met at Westchester University, where you received your master's, and you also have your doctorate in
Mm.
education as well. Um, is that something that you always thought you would get into? Was education?
Yeah, yes and no. When I was an undergrad, I went to Eastern University for undergrad for the last 2 years of my undergrad degree. Um, I was dead set on being a tenured professor. That's what I wanted. I was prepping for that. Even when I was at Westchester, that's what I was prepping for. I was even for yeah. So after that, yeah. But then um, I actually, so the doctor that I have now is not the doctor that I started off with, right? So I was enrolled in one program at the University of Iowa. I left that program mid program, um, and I basically transferred to St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, which is
Mm-hmm.
where I have my doctorate from. So yes and no. In a way, I did, but not in this way. No.
Why education?
Um, I don't know. I love just being in the space where learning happens. Right? To me, there's no greater space learning for all of us to ask questions, be curious about the world, just come up with ideas about how to make the world better. That for me is what true education is, and being able to reflect and discuss and be in community. That's what true education is. And
Mhm.
so I don't know, I easily gravitated toward that when I was in college.
Mhm.
I think it all started because I took an interpersonal communication class when I was at community college,
Mhm.
and that's where I just kind of fell in love with like the academy and learning and things like that. That was one of my favorite classes. I was looking forward to it, just every week, and yeah, and so that's how everything kind of took off for me.
What has changed since the beginning of your career in education, and sort of what led you to start your own institution?
Yeah, so what's changed is the way in which I believe I can accomplish what I want. So I was someone who said, okay, I will gain all these knowledge and skills and abilities throughout my career so I can fix the system.
Mm-hmm.
However, I hit a wall with that. And so I got to a point where I said, okay, well, there are spaces in which many of the spaces in higher education won't allow me to create the type of change that I want. So, and I began to learn that and see that throughout my career, being hit with roadblocks, while I'm on campus and things like that. So the question then became for me is, okay, so if this is what I'm passionate about and these are the roadblocks that I'm facing, do I need to go outside the existing system?
Mm-hmm.
And so the answer it became yeah, right? And so it became yeah.
You mentioned fixing the system and
Mhm.
being hit with roadblocks. What system were you trying to fix?
Higher ed as a whole. Yeah, I have a tendency to try to take on big problems.
Don't
So
we all? And I
yeah,
think it's because we're passionate. But I want to know,
yeah,
like, what if you? I know that you're still an educator, so I want to be considerate of that in what you share. But I want to know what sort of roadblocks were you hitting, and why did you
yeah,
think that it was going to be you to change that?
yeah. So I was really focused on making sure that we as our society don't sacrifice the learning in spite like the learning experience for credentials, right? Like, okay, yes, I'm for educating for the workforce. I'm for all that, right? Simultaneously, though, we also have to educate for education's sake, and it's part of our mission as institutions, and it's important to think through, okay, how we can blend that with workforce skills and things like that. So when I me just mentioning that oftentimes when I was in meetings would have people looking at me like I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were looking at me like I said shut down the university.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like what I wanted. I wanted for us to create more balance in both because we do as a social institution, as an educational institution, have a responsibility to our society, our democracy, by virtue of the things we teach and how we prepare citizens in society. So that's the one of the biggest roadblocks that I had, and I'm like, okay, now if everything is starting to go in the direction of wanting to do more education for workforce stuff, then because I mean, and for good reason, right? The public perception of higher education is probably it's one of its lowest points ever in American higher education right now. So that means that um, universities are going to try to fit public demand in order to make it relevant and have people want to invest in their education by way of the university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we're at that point. So they're going to do whatever whatever they can to make sure their enrollment stays up,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which was kind of sort of antithetical to what I was doing. Well, what I believe should happen. Yeah.
Is this similar to when we talk about grades K through 12 and how teachers sort of teach to a test rather than like there's this great focus on standardized testing rather
Yeah.
than um, I don't know, other curriculums and other ways of learning? Were you seeing in higher education that it was just like teaching to students so that they can get a job after school?
Basically, yeah, yeah. They get to make sure that they have a job, which again, I'm all for, right? Like, I don't want to get the students to be unemployed. However, simultaneously, yeah, my argument was, look, we could do that and this, right? That was my argument. But I began to see, okay, if this one piece of educating for a better society is going to go out the window, well, it's still necessary to happen, but is there another space in which it can happen? And that's when I came up with the idea for my institute.
I love that. So what was the catalyst? Like everybody has a breaking point where they're like, all right, it's time to start something on my own.
Yeah, so I'll tell you two stories that really led me to get to going here. First was from one of my mentors. So I was on a trajectory to wanting to be a college president. And so one of my mentors, we were going to a football game one day, and he was like, "Yo, just want to let you know." He was like, "I know you have your eyes set on being president, but maybe that should be your backup plan." And so in my head, I'm like, "What?" Like, to me, like, this is the ultimate job possible, right? At that time, this is what I was thinking, and so I said, "Okay," and I just kind of let it sit there. The second instance came a couple of weeks later while I was interviewing for a job. I was in the middle of a search, and I didn't get the job. However, the person the manager emailed me and said, "I would like to provide you with some feedback. Are you open to having a conversation?" So I said, "Yeah." You get on the call. He says, "What is your ultimate goal?" I said, "To be a college president." He was like, "That's not good enough. And you could do much better than that." Okay, so now this is two instances that two different people, one who knows me, and one who doesn't really know me, told me that I need to make a career switch because I can do better than what the system would allow me to be.
And at that time, did you see that in yourself? Did you see that you were bigger than this system that you were working toward, or
No,
working to try to change?
no, I didn't. Not at all. Not at all. I was dead set on, like, this is a path. This is the only path I could do, so to speak. And me trying to create something else, no, I'm not really trying to do all that. Right? I'm not trying to do that right now. And so from those instances, I had a couple of things come down the pike, actually. So I was at a conference, our national conference for higher ed folks, the American Association for Colleges and Universities. I was there in 2024, January 2024, and I was at a panel presentation about startup universities. These are legitimate institutions, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to go that far, right? To have a university, a startup, maybe not. However, I definitely want to create a learning space, though. And I do have some prototype from my experiences in university to know what learning spaces can be. So I said, okay, what would it look like for me to do my own thing and kind of model my idea after a university and somewhat, but not go that far, right?
Right.
And so that's how the institute came to be.
So I kind of want to go back to your love of buses, your love of SEPTA as a kid,
Hmm.
and talking, and your love of systems, because it seems as though in order to create this institute, that you would have to come up with some sort of system, and you develop this prototype just based on your experience in higher education. So what then I know what inspired you to start the People's Institute for the Common Good, but what is the process to begin an institution?
Yeah. You need to do a couple of things. You need to register the business within your state. So that's the first thing. You need to make sure that no one has the name that you want. And so I played around with so many different names. I probably just played around for 2-3 weeks about, just different names and seeing how does it work? Does it fit? Does this wording fit what I want to do? Does it fit what I want to convey? So once you decide on your name, you register it with the state, which is pretty quick. Literally took me like 12 hours to get my business registered to the state of Texas. But then you need to register for your 501c3 status with the federal government. That takes like 2 weeks or so. So those are the sort of the legal things you need to do, while simultaneously picking your board of directors. Now, these are people that are going to help guide you as you set this up, help oversee the strength of the organization. So technically, the board of directors is my boss, right? Okay. Technically, that's what they are.
Yeah.
And so, you pick people who you trust, who have your best interests, who know what you're trying to do and can understand your vision. And so that's how you set it all up.
And I know there was the gap that you were trying to fill was not just teaching towards getting a job, but teaching for the love of learning and other things as well. So tell me about that curriculum. And like, I know that you and I spoke before that you launched this institution in 2024, but it wasn't until you founded in 2024, but you didn't launch until 2025. What was that gap?
Yeah, so the gap really was my own trepidation, to be honest with you. I was scared, I was nervous. I didn't know. I was like, dang, how many people will actually like this idea? How many people are going to support it? Will people actually be like engaged with it? And so I was nervous about it, but it really actually helped me out. That year gap helped me out because it allowed me to really think through my product and my services to make sure that it was polished enough. Being an entrepreneur, you're always going to refine and get things, moving in a better direction as you go. But I think the key is not trying to have something that's half-baked.
Yeah.
And so that year helped me to really think through and flesh out what programs I wanted, how I was going to support the community. And so that in hindsight, it turned out to be the best thing.
When we return, the People's Institute for Common Good's curriculum.
So talk to us a little bit about your products and your services. First of all, how do you define your institution? And then what services do you provide?
Yeah, so I define my institution as a place for shared learning and collective imagination for the good of humanity. Right? And so that's what we focus on. And that shows up in 3 different ways. One, through our book club. Our book club is called the Better Society Book Club, where this is a community space in which we all read together. We have a bookstore in Dallas that sponsors the book club, and so they provide us with space to meet. Right now we are doing a summer series on the importance of rest, and so all of our books are about rest. In the fall, we will transition to the importance of friendship. And we'll be exploring the question of what does it mean to be a good friend.
Wow.
And so these are things to think about as adults that I feel like we don't really have a lot of space and time to really digest. And so for me, again, so we're all learning together, right? And I just love it. So that's the first way. Second way is through our monthly Lunch and Learn series. This is where We invite scholars, experts, thought leaders to have a conversation about their work on an important topic in society. The good news about these lunch and learns is that for everyone who attends, it's not only free, but it also counts as professional development. And so you attend, you get a digital badge that you can use to put on LinkedIn and to showcase to your employer. Because sometimes employers will say you need to do 20 hours of development a year, however that looks. And so for me, I said, okay, again, so there's some of the workforce piece coming back, right? But simultaneously trying to do what I want to do, right? And so again, yeah, we could blend both, right? So there's that. The final thing is what we have not launched yet, but will be this fall, is our Voices for Good Distinguished Speaker Series. This is where we bring scholars, experts, thought leaders to Dallas to engage with the local community about their work. And so we're looking at bringing Dr. Courtney Cox is an associate professor of communication at the University of Oregon. She just wrote a book about women's basketball and gender politics in the media. And so Dallas is an important place for women's basketball. And so, yeah, we have a lot of big Dallas Wings fans here, and I'm one of them. And so,
Awesome.
so this is important topic to have with our community. And she's from Dallas too, so that also is a big plus.
Yeah. How do you go about choosing these topics?
Yeah, so these topics, it's a combination of a couple of things. One, I try to make it relevant for what's going on in society right now. So for our July Lunch and Learn, we had Samaji Best, who is a public policy strategist from Dallas. We were talking about the legislature and bills and policies that have gone through that may not have gotten as much attention as they should have, just with all the stuff going on in the media.
Right.
And so that was an important conversation for people to have, because they needed to know really what's coming down the pipe, especially here in Texas, where we're now having a conversation about redistricting, right? So I try to blend it with that, with a lot of the work that's coming out from authors and scholars. So when books come out, I have a list of books that are due out by X date. So it's trying to get them in their, on their calendar, to try to bring them or to have them on Zoom.
Yeah.
That's how I do it. Yeah.
No, I really love that. I love the curriculum that you're building, and also the different topics that you're allowing people to have dialogue about. Because back to your point about colleges and in the state of higher education and teaching towards just the profession, I think we lose some of the skills like that we don't learn in school, so that when we are out as an adult, we know how to sort of go about life. I want to talk to you though about your organization is creating spaces for tough conversations. How are you doing that, and like what makes a space truly safe for honest dialogue?
Yeah. So I'll tell you about just a little bit how that takes place in our book club. So in the book club, we read books that really make us question our beliefs, right? Makes us question our thought processes about whatever topic we're exploring, right? And so and I've heard several people in the book club members talk about how they're still struggling with certain aspects of the text, right? So we're doing summer series on rest, and a couple of the people in the book club were like, yeah, like my mind of how I have to work and how I was raised and how I was taught is kind of in conflict with what we're reading and what we're exploring. Right? And so like it's a conflict that creates, but it also creates curiosity too.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beautiful part about all of this is like, okay, yes, there are things that our society has taught us over the course of time that are no longer benefiting us, but we're still doing it. Okay? So we have the knowledge now to be able to choose a different path to, quite frankly, liberate ourselves in one way or another, from those existing structures, and so we were able to do that despite like, yeah. So those are where tough conversations really come into play. I think it's a lot of it's internal,
Yeah.
but some of it is external too. Again, we're all questioning our beliefs in our book club about these different topics.
I think what's great too, that you're creating a space for people to open up and have conversations where some people might disagree and others might agree. I think we live right now in a society where people are kind of afraid to speak out about things that they might be uncomfortable by, because for backlash or for what's happening right now politically. Do you think, and it seems like this space that you're holding kind of like challenges that or allows for people to be open? Would you agree, or
Absolutely.
do you find that people in your book club are more feel comfortable to open up and have honest dialogue?
Yeah, I definitely feel that, and that was a part of my intention as well, to create that space where we can have that open and honest dialogue. And so, yeah, I mean, we've had book club sessions where folks have been touched by something that's in the book so much that the conversation goes in a different direction about just some of the lived experiences that are been that they experience, uh, by virtue of whatever topic we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it becomes less about the book, but we talk about the everyday encounters with XYZ topic. Yeah.
Yeah. As an educator and a scholar, like how do you bridge the gap between academic theory and then real world impact?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, just as a person, I tend to start theoretically. That's how I operate. Um, but what I gained my educational philosophy centers around people like bell hooks, right? So that's where I bring in my understanding from her readings of, yeah, she does talk a bit about theory. Like she balances both quite well in her books about what education should be and what it could be, uh, and how we can engage in theory, how we can talk about it, while at the same time being part of community. And I think for me, that's where the practical component comes in, as taking down the walls of these universities, so to speak,
Yeah.
and making the knowledge and the insights and the research and all the scholarship accessible to the public.
Yeah.
And so that is where I feel like I balance both.
That's awesome. How have people found out about your institution so
Yeah.
far? And what's been the response since its inception?
Yeah, so people found out social media has been our best friend. And so LinkedIn, Instagram are the two main places where we post. The other way that folks have learned is through collaboration, right? And so that was one early lesson that I learned, in the beginning, was like, look, you can't do this work by yourself. You definitely need other people to support you, because whether you're whatever startup venture you're doing,
Yeah.
you need, because you don't really have name recognition, so you need to rely on other people's name to support you, to help get eyes on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's just the way it goes. That's just the way it is, right? Unless you just got a bunch of money in which you can just flood social media and buy ads, which I
Yeah.
don't. So, if you don't have that, you got to rely on others. And so, but that's been so much fun too, because that has led to building concrete partnerships with organizations, as we do our work to support our work. And now we're at a point where not only we have partners within the community, we also have sponsors to support the work too.
Yeah.
So, banks and credit unions, and other organizations, cultural centers in the city are supporting the work by virtue of either donating funds or donating space for us to host our event.
No, I love that. And I think that that's what's so important too to highlight about your story and about your institution is the partnerships, because you are running a nonprofit. And for the listeners, just to repeat, these services that you're providing are free. But as a business owner, how are you continuing to keep your services free while also bringing money to your institution?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest things that I think about quite a bit. And so the way we do it is through those sponsorships. Those are free. I mean, those help to keep it free while helping to run the operations of the organization. And the good news for this is that the operational costs are not expensive for what I'm doing. My true only overhead is, technology costs. So
Yeah.
I don't have a physical space. So I don't need a physical space. Everything is virtual. And so that is all I need. So that's the good news, right?
Yeah.
Simultaneously, we are applying for grants as well, and again, other sponsorships that will help us move forward. But yeah, that's how we're doing it.
Stay tuned. When we come back, Dr. Bennett and I discuss the future of educational entrepreneurship.
What do you think is the future for educational entrepreneurship? And when you were building this institution, were there any other business models similar to yours that you were looking up to?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the future of education entrepreneurship is going to keep growing. I do believe that a lot of people who are educators, whether K-12 or higher ed, are just really frustrated with how things are. And I think there are going to be more people leaving these spaces to do their own thing. I feel like there's actually quite a big boom in the K-12 space right now
Yeah.
for education entrepreneurship. So that's where most of it, where most of the conversation is. Those who leave higher ed tend to do consulting and things like that. And so, yeah, so you'll see that. But I think it's definitely going to keep growing too. In terms of how I built this, I based this off of. So, yes, I based some of this off of my own experiences. So I'm actually a visiting scholar at Rutgers University. And so one of my mentors, she runs an institute and a center as part of her research. The Center for Minority Serving Institutions and the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice, all part of Rutgers Graduate School of Education. And so I kind of built it based upon that, based upon that framework, because that kind of gave me some type of insights about what I could do. It gave me insights about how I can get people in a space. And it's totally on Zoom and things like that. And she also has in-person programs. So that kind of gave me the insights for, okay, here's how to convene people. But in terms of the model itself, I actually blended some of the framework based off of a book I read about speculative design for potential universities. There's a couple different models in there that the author talks about for how universities can look like in the future. And so there's one called the Humanities Think Tank, in which it's a small micro university, right, where people are just coming together to study and to talk and to advocate for social change and do things. So I kind of built it based upon that too. So I took a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and here's what I'm going to come up with.
Do you think that there may be a time in which people build institutions like the one that you're creating where you can get a full degree from rather than a traditional university?
There's definitely some out there that are like that, and again, that are totally legitimate. There's a few that are going right now. So, Minerva University in California is one place. They've built this thing up over about the last couple of decades, and it's wild. It's wild. And so there's that. I do think some of the futurist research in higher ed does point to what you're saying though. These sort of smaller micro spaces, more niche spaces, community focused spaces can be places for learning, right? So like, why can't I use my neighborhood as a learning space? Is some of the questions that people begin to ask. Like, okay, why can't I have a college here in this neighborhood that addresses the needs of this neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and how does it break down into majors, or what is the curriculum? Is it more like life lessons, like deeper thought type of things, like what you guys are focusing on rest and the importance of being friend, more of like those interpersonal communications type of ideals, or or are we looking at majors?
It's a good question. And so, in some instances, yes, in some instances, no, right? In fact, I think this speaks to some of the workforce data that's come out that suggests that a lot of employers are actually thinking about getting rid of their degree requirements for their positions.
Wow.
And so then, if that's the case, if we want to get rid of degrees, uh, maybe not all the way, but at least to some point, what then is the gap? Like, what do you get as part of going to an environment, a university? Like, what do you get as a result? So there's a couple different frameworks out there that suggest that, one, there is no degree. It's just learning for learning's sake. That's all it is. And you can get credentials along the way, such as badges and things like that. But there's no like end degree. That's one way. Other models come up with universities actually not being places that you actually leave. So these are interesting, where
Oh, wow.
you can stay at the university for as long as you want. There is no endpoint.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's just
So
continuous learning
just continuous
for
learning.
whatever subjects you might want to take
hmm
part in, and then maybe get a certificate of some sort afterwards.
Right. And so again, it's interesting, right? Because now we're starting to explore what lifelong learning looks like. There is no point where I have to technically leave. I can keep this space provides me with an opportunity to be a better person, to learn, to experiment, to fuel my ideas. I don't need to leave. And so again, how we think about that, and again, tying it back to community. For me, my institute is about the community, and why should I have a space where, if it's about community, where folks have to leave? Your time is never up.
Yeah. I mean, I think that poses a question for universities, which is like, how can universities better serve the communities that they're in, not just the students that are admitting?
That was what you just said was one of my biggest arguments when I was in higher ed full time. My argument always was, we are the blank University of Dallas, but how well do we serve Dallas? And that was my line. Some people didn't like that, but it's
Right.
true. It's a
Yeah.
good question, right? Like, you can't put a billboard advertising university in a neighborhood that you don't serve, but yet you do. How does that work?
And are you talking about the fact that these institutions are in usually marginalized communities?
That these institutions, and the one I'm talking about, is not in a marginalized community, very wealthy neighborhood,
Okay.
but they put billboards in marginalized communities to advertise.
Okay.
But you don't do outreach there. Your only outreach is that billboard.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you can't do that. No one's going to trust you as an entity if you. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like marketing 101.
Yeah,
But, no one's going to trust you as an entity if you just show up basically when it's convenient for you and when you need students. And so you're going to just try to pull, students from a certain area, when for the longest time you've rejected that area and said, we want this type of student. But
Yeah.
now that you see that your enrollment is declining, now you need everybody now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it's a tricky loophole too, because they'll also tack on $100,000 student loan
right,
bill for you, and then
yeah, yeah,
student loan payments are. I feel like this, in we're not talking about student loans and the cost of education, but I think that gets into it as well. Is that this is a great alternative, because I feel I mean, we're in trillions of dollars of debt.
yep,
It in this country. On education and
yeah.
people, and we're only teaching towards a job, and many of these jobs aren't even paying uh, enough money for you to be paying these student loans back. So it's,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so this is really this experience has really made me think about how do I define higher ed? Yes, higher education is a sort of a level or status that we have, like you go from K-12 to higher ed in that way. But I think of it more of as a higher level of consciousness or higher level of being.
Yes.
Um, and that comes through just what I'm trying to do, right? Learning and shared spaces. And so for me, this is how I define higher education. You know, not so much the as in the level or the tier that you are in within the system, but how well you are able to be in community with other people, engaging in learning, engaging in conversations, and using curiosity to be a better person.
I love it. What does success look like for the People's Institute
Yeah.
in a few years, 10 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something I've thought about a little bit, but haven't given that much thought to it. Not gonna lie. I would think success would look like, from an operational standpoint, uh, being financially secure, uh, forming partnerships with universities. Actually, I actually think there's space for us to work together in this endeavor. Um, In fact, I had a conversation this morning with a university who reached out to me about partnering up. So
That's
there's an
amazing.
there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I can't fully say where it is yet, but it'll happen in due time. And so there's space there. And so I think it's, yeah, being financially stable, continuing to support the community, um, being able to bring thought leaders and experts, top thought leaders and experts, to the community, who are dedicated to bettering society. Um, yeah, that's what it looks like for me.
If someone leaves one of your workshops or programs, like, what's the feeling or thought that you hope stays with them?
Mm. My feeling and thought is that they feel like they've learned something, that they've been empowered to think creatively and to think critically, and that they know that they always have a space at the institute to keep learning, to keep coming back, and that your presence will always be welcome. Yeah.
What do you see for yourself as somebody that we started this conversation with? You wanted to be a president of a university, and you've taken this path in entrepreneurship to really, you're sort of trying to dismantle a system, which I think is pretty badass, and you're kind of disrupting an institution, a long systemic institution. Like, what do you what's your legacy that you hope to leave behind?
Yeah, I think my legacy that I hope to leave behind is that, is that, and I hope people, feel encouraged by this, um, is that, that you can dream and you can do whatever you want to do, right? That you can get all the knowledge, skills, and abilities to work in one space, but there might be times when that might run out, but you still have that knowledge and that skill, and you can apply that in whatever space you want. And so I hope people, when this is all over, I hope people see that, that I was someone who did all these fellowships and did all these different things and all these different leadership things, but who was able to see the bigger connection in what I truly wanted and what I truly believe that education should be, and decided to make the bold step to go this way.
I really appreciate you coming on to A Bright Idea, because what you're doing is not like light work. It's not a cakewalk at all. You're literally building your own curriculum and building your own school. And that takes a lot of power and a lot of thought, a lot of systems to put in place. So I hope that somebody out there listening to this interview will reach out and join one of your programs, reach out and support you, and help you grow, or use this as inspiration to start their own thing, because I do agree education is in a it's in a scary place right now, and so we need people like you and like others to make a change. So thank you for coming on to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, good to be here with you today.
Thank you. And lastly, how can people find you?
So you can find us on Instagram and on LinkedIn. On Instagram at Institute for Common Good, and on LinkedIn, the People's Institute for the Common Good. So you can find us there. And so, so please follow, share, like, and join one of our events.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea podcast. Today's guest was Dr. Lance Bennett, founder of the People's Institute for Common Good. Dr. Bennett can be found on Instagram at the People's Institute for Common Good and on LinkedIn at the People's Institute for Common Good. Encourage your audience to follow, like, share, and join one of their events to stay connected and informed. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring on more stories like Dr. Bennett's. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for updates. And if there's a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from next, drop us a message. If you would like to support our show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at A Bright Idea Podcast. This episode was edited by Chris Kramer, and all social media was handled by my social media manager, Shekinah Henderson. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.